All right, so we had the recording. Thanks for staying on to see some of the hands-on component of the study group. What I want to show you now is a different environment. We were using a CML, but now I need to use a different one. So I'm going to go ahead and pop over to DevNet. So I need to find my DevNet one, turn this one off. If you're not familiar with DevNet, in my lab guide, and I'll put the link up here for the lab guide, it'll show you how to reserve DevNet sandboxes. I want DevNet. Where are you at, DevNet? There you are. All right, so DevNet's coming up here. This is my lab guide. So at the top of it, there's a table of contents. And I'm going to go ahead and grab this link here and put it in the chat room. To the chat room. If you don't already have this, here it is. And then another piece of this is because this is an ongoing lab, you'll see me adding labs over time. These are the ones that we have in here so far. If you're just getting started with us, kind of like the goal of this lab is to help people that are studying for the Ansible specialist in network automation. That particular certification is kind of at a point where it's getting ready to change. So you're kind of hitting it at a transition point. So some of the information is a little bit dated and using some of the older tools. But for us, like some of these DevNet environments, we can only get some of the older stuff to work depending on the version of Python that's running on the jump box and that kind of stuff. So the DevNet is actually a decent environment for like learning how to do some of the like more mature Ansible things. Some of the newer stuff like the Ansible automation controller and the Ansible navigator, which is the newer command line tool, that stuff works better in the Red Hat labs. So we have some self-service labs. So you'll see in my lab guide, sometimes I'm asking you to go to DevNet, and sometimes I'm asking you to go to the Red Hat self-service labs. But with both of them, I'm asking you to create a repository. And then to update that repository, your personal repository called My Project over time, because that way you can save all your progress. And also these labs build on each other, so there's no need to keep reconfiguring everything from scratch every time. So if you're just getting started with us, you'll notice that the beginning of this kind of shows you how to get started in the DevNet and create an account, start using DevNet, reserve this CML, Cisco Modeling Labs, and that kind of stuff. Once you learn how to do that, you're gonna learn how to clone down one of my repositories that has a topology file, and you're going to reuse that topology file over and over again. So that way you can change the CML environment to have the correct topology with the routers and switches and everything else. So you'll learn how to do that like earlier in the lab guide. But the one that you're always going to need to start from afterwards is this one, because I do have a make file that sets up the jump box a certain way so that we can use it. So this one you're going to want to run early on, like after you reserve the environment and you connect your VPN. The VPN credentials come to you in the form of an email from Cisco. Once you connect the VPN, you can go to the CML. The CML is always the same IP. It's always 10.10.20.161 with the login of developer, and then the passwords capital C1 SCO 12345, and that's in the documentation and the email that they send you and all that good stuff. So you go in there, and what I've already done is I've turned off their default configuration or topology, and then I've uploaded mine. So you upload it by clicking import, finding it, and then once it's there, you can set it as a lab, and then you can go back to it and click on it and start it, right? So mine's already up and running. And then the part that I'm talking about that is documented in the lab guide of like modifying your jump box and the like. Sometimes you don't have to modify the jump box because you're in our Red Hat labs, right? But you always need to go through some steps, and the steps will be in there to remind you to pull down your repository and also to save your work, right? So when you finish the labs, you're going to want to save them and go through these steps, these git commands, so that you can save your work by committing it and pushing it into your repository, right? So it shows you like how to set up a free GitLab account and the like. So once you have that, every time you're going to go and you're going to clone it down, and I've already done that, and you change directories into my repo, like so you're cloning down this repo, you're changing directories, and you're running a script. But in order for the script to work correctly for you, you need to change this variable. So this is an environment variable, and it's based off of your username in GitLab. So you need to change it to your username. So that way, when you run the make file in that script, it's going to interact with your repository. So when it completes, it's going to do a bunch of updating different versions of Ansible stuff, right, and collections and those types of things. And then ultimately, you'll be able to change directories into your My Project, and it should have all of your work. And then there's similar steps at the end that I'll go through quickly to show you how to save your work, right? So once you have a My Project, then you'll use that in all the environments. You'll just continue to build on everything, right? So here it's talking about the topology and so on and so forth. So I've already done my stuff, my steps. So I'm sitting down here, and what I want to do is SSH into the jump box. And I can only access it through the VPN. So make sure you have your VPN established. Capital C1 SEO 1 2 3 4 5. Now I'm in the jump box, and if I list my directories, you can see this is the directory that you clone down with my files in it. And it does its thing when you do that make file and runs the scripts. And afterwards, you're going to change directories over to my project, and that'll be your my project. So this one, I have some files in here. So these are things that I've done in previous labs. If you haven't done these, don't worry, you can follow along, but you're going to want to like at some point catch up to us and go through those labs, and then you'll have all the same content. If you need to cheat, you can actually go to my project, right, on GitLab. It's a public repo, and you can copy them and stuff like that. So here are the IP addresses. They don't change, all that topology stuff, and so on and so forth. So where we need to be after setup, and if I get back to the table of contents, let me scroll up here. All right, so we're over here, and yeah, so I forgot to make the link for the one we're on today, but I'll go to this one since it's close to it. Or actually, I just need to change the date. What was the things that conditionals? No, this is the right date. Oh, I didn't make the table of content link, but I do have the date down here. So we're going to learn about conditionals today. So again, if you don't have your environment, don't worry. You can just watch and catch up to us. So with the conditionals, this is documentation. So I would encourage you to go here because there's tons of conditionals, right? So conditionals are just conditions, right? They're either true or false, and we can have ands or ors or nots and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to this. So we don't have time to like go through that level of detail, but there's a lot of information in this documentation. If you were here, we're going to create a new playbook, right? So I created this, but I deleted it, so I would build it again for you guys. Yeah, so I don't have it in here. So I'm going to create this playbook, and to save time here, I'm just going to go ahead and copy it, and then I'll talk through it. So in this environment here, I don't have VS Code, right, because I'm kind of doing everything old school, like the old test. So I'm going to use Vim. And what was the name of it? The Vim banner.yaml. All right, so in Vim, it's different than Nano. So whichever one you're comfortable with, you can use that, from the terminal. Use I to insert, and there's a bunch of other shortcuts that I forget. But here's the playbook. Now be careful that you have the proper syntax. So just make sure that everything aligns properly. So at the top of this, just like any playbook, we have hosts that points to the group in our inventory. So I have this group that encompasses like all of the networking devices, regardless if they are iOS or Nexus. So we're going to run it against both of those. Gather facts is false because we're not talking to servers. We're talking to network devices. So this just saves us some time here. It doesn't apply. The iOS banner. So this is going to be a message of the day banner. And then this is just the text that we're going to send. Right. So these devices haven't been configured for banners yet. And if I save it right now, it's really not going to work. And the reason for that is I have both of these in here. but I don't want to iterate through both of the groups through each one of these modules because the iOS isn't going to like the Nexus and the Nexus isn't going to like the iOS. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more, right? So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And we'll go back into the lab guide. And what we're saying here is we need to use a conditional. So one of the conditionals we can use is we can map it to or point it to, in this case, equals, right, to the OS that we're running. So the Ansible underscore network underscore OS is one of the built-in variables, a magic variable. And we can use those conditions to say, okay, this one here is for the iOS OS, and this is for Nexus OS. So I'll go ahead and grab both of these and go back into that file. Probably should just stayed in there, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go up to here and I to insert, and I'll paste those in here. And I'm going to grab this one and delete this. All right, and then add it down here. And this is the kind of stuff like in the old test you'd have to deal with because you have to, work around how fast you can do all these types of things. So that's something to keep in mind where VS Code makes things so much easier. So now it makes more sense, right? I'm only going to run iOS against iOS module and Nexus OS against a Nexus OS module. So that should be good to go. And then we want to run the playbook, right? So the playbook should look like this. So hopefully my CML environment is good. So we'll see here in a second if everything works. So I'm going to go ahead and run the playbook. Oops. All right, so what do we do here? Distribution router, which is an iOS banner. All right, so what's going on here with because we're going to everything. This router 1 and 2, switch, core, like everything's screwed up. All right, so let me go back into the file and see what I did here. Oh, duh. It's only going to work if we have it in the right alignment. There. Conditions are at the same level as the module. You see that? All right, so that did not do anything. And actually, I did that on purpose, right, just to show you guys. So here we go. You can see it skips what doesn't apply, right, because the Nexus doesn't apply here, but here are all the routers. These 3 routers do apply, and then vice versa. All right, so here we have changes and OKs. So those banners now exist. I should be able to see those if I SSH into one of them. So if I go in here and I've got my inventory file, go up to this here, these devices up here. All right, so one of the core routers, this is one of the core routers. I'll go ahead and copy that. I think Cisco is the username for everything. So SSH Cisco at that IP address. Oh, log in. All right, so you can see our little banner popped up. So it applied it there as expected. So that was one condition. So we can become fancy and we can have multiple conditions. So this one we want to gather some iOS facts. So we're going to gather the hardware subset of the facts instead of just minimum. We're going to grab like hardware too. Um, so this time it's a little bit more complicated because it's looking at a particular model that we pulled in from facts and also the version, right? So when we gather facts up here, it automatically loads those into memory, which is different than like when we do like the parsers, like show commands, and if we do like get the state of gather in a resource module, those we have to use the register parameter to pull them in for memory. But here, it's automatically done for us in iOS facts or what we call network facts. So it's there, so we can use those as conditions right away. So that's what we're going to do is we'll see like the versions that are in there running, and then those should work, right? Because we're only going to use what's already in the device, so obviously it's going to work. But we could use this as like a like go further and use it as like a compliance check. So I'll go ahead and grab this to save some time, and then hopefully I don't botch the syntax when I paste it. So we're going to call this one facts underscore conditional dot YAML. Paste it in, hope for the best. So that looks good. These are under there. Right. So at this point, we don't have our conditions yet. So we have that same problem, right? Because we're going to try to use iOS modules in the Nexus OS also. So yeah, so what I need to do is I'll leave this one open this time. So we need to fix it up here. So here we have a group of routers and a group of switches that are underneath, like these are child groups underneath the parent, which was A4N-net. So instead of this time using the OS, we're using the group, right? So the inventory underscore host name is a magic variable that points to the inventory. So it grabs those host names, iterates through them, and then in groups would be that it would either be in the router group or the switch group. So back to here, and I'll just go ahead and make a space, right? Delete this one. Get this one with the other one. That one, and then I got to fix up these debugs so they don't mess up. Or do this one. When, and then those are switches, and then router. Right here. That doesn't seem right. Move it over a little bit. Yeah. Is this one good, 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 good? All right, so this and then run it. And where do I get a little bit fancier, right? This one, add multi-line. Oh, here's the multi-line conditionals here. Yes, this is just adding conditions to two different tasks with the same ones. Yes, I kind of misspoke there. All right, so I got ahead of myself on that one. So let me run this one. Escape. Let me keep paying. Okay, so the router stuff, the model and version for each one. And then the Nexus ones, their model and version. Yeah, so now I can use, I got ahead of myself. Now I can use these as conditions. So the first one, this is just to show you how to print them out into, to separate the debugs and the facts. So the next one, we get a little bit fancier here because now we're going to move a little bit further down into the multi-line conditionals. All right, so add appropriate multi-line conditionals to appropriate debug task. All right, so yes, I think I'm just changing this time. I'm not making a new. I'm not creating a new playbook. I'm just going to modify what we already had. So we already had this part, right? So what I have to do is when you have multiple of whatever, it's a list. So I got to move it down. We had it like at the same level. So now we'll create the list with the dashes. So each one of those will be its own line. So now we want to say it has to equal these versions or be greater than or equal to for this or this model type and greater than or equal to this version. And then this is the one for Nexus. So I'll go ahead and grab this for the router. And we're doing this just against the debug task, right? Yeah, then we're going to change it so it fails. Yeah, so this is how we could do the compliance check. All right, so there, so let me get back into that one. All right, so I'm just going to change it for the debug part. Dash. Oh, I botched that. Forgot that I grabbed all this, so sorry. Always fun to watch somebody screw up a Vim editor. There. All right, so this will make sense for debugging, only if this criteria is met. And then this one is different. So let me move this over. And then I just need to grab these two. All right. Okay, so we should only print it out if these conditions are met, which they will be, right? Because we saw these were versions that we saw earlier. So right now it would be like a true condition. Rumble roll, please. Okay, so all that works as expected. So here's where it would be where we'd have an issue, right? So we said here it's an 8, so I just need to change the 8 to a 9 and the 4 to a 5. So now it shouldn't work. Should skip it. You see all the results were skipped for the show results. So that could be like a fail for a compliance check too, if we use those same conditions. All right, so that worked as expected. So just a multiple line, but this time it was false. It wasn't true. Right here, this one was false. So skipping those guys. So now here is what I talked about earlier, saving your work. So what you want to do here is you want to set up your Git on the jump box with your username. So this is your GitLab username. So if you haven't done so, you'll need to go and create a free GitLab account. So I'm going to go back into here and put my username in. And then I'm going to put my email into. It doesn't matter. This one you can just copy. The email doesn't have to be valid. It doesn't matter. Just put something in there so it doesn't give you a complaint. Okay, so that's in there. All right, so now I can use my regular Git commands. So normally the way that this works is you need to add them in Git, your changes. So what I want to do is add all the things, right, that I created today. So I can do dash all. So now it's staged. So if I do git status, right, you can see that I've added these new files in here, but I haven't committed them yet. Right. So to commit them, it's git commit -m and then a comment. This is for your own purposes. So today was June 29th study, right? But this is only committed locally in my local Git repository. So I want to push it to my remote repository, which is my remote GitLab that I cloned down earlier. So, and that was a part of the make file in the scripting. It pulled it down for me. But I had to give it my username, if you recall, with the environment variable that I set. So I want to do git push. All right, and it's asking me for my username for the remote side. And then my password. Right, and it's making those changes. So if I were to go to my GitLab, I would see that that's updated. And then when I pull it down the next time, I have all those changes, or in other words, I have all those playbooks that we created this time around. So like the facts conditionals as an example. So as you do these labs, wherever you stop, make sure you save your work. And then you'll see I'll have some new sections I'll be adding into here for the next session. So in 2 weeks, we'll have another topic. I think we'll do loops is the next thing on my list. So again, thank you for joining today, especially those who stayed on the whole time. Does anybody have any questions or anything about the study group before I drop off here? Okay. Well, again, thank you again for attending. I hope you enjoyed the sessions today. And I hope you have a great weekend and 4th of July and all that stuff coming up. All right, take care.